He karakia tīmata. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou, ki hei mauri ora.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this webinar for the Kaipara District Plan Exposure Draft. Enjoy the webinar and enjoy getting involved with this great opportunity which Kaipara District Council has never had before, to be involved in an exposure draft for the district plan. This is the last ever Kaipara District Plan, so make the most of it. Get stuck in, Kaipara. Kia pai tō rā.
Kia ora koutou, ko Catherine Overwater, tako ingoa. I am the district planning team leader here with you today with my team from the district plan, and we're going to talk to you about the exposure draft, Kaipara District Plan, and today being webinar 7, our very final webinar for the series is on the Tangata Whenua, Mana Whenua values. So I'm just going to quickly introduce our team. So we have Paul Vanders. Paul, can you just say quick hello there, please?
Kia ora, Paul Vanders, District Planner. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Michael Day, you there?
Kia ora koutou, ko Michael Day, toko ingoa, ko ahau Strategy, Policy and Governance Manager ki te kunihira o Kaipara. Good morning, hope you enjoy this webinar, and please don't forget to give us feedback by the 16th of September. Thank you.
Kia ora, Michael. Ty, do you want to introduce yourself?
Kia ora koutou, ko Tāwhiua tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei no te ori o hau, ko te graduate planner hau, ki te kaunihira o te Kaipara. Kia ora mai tātou.
Kia ora, Ty. And we've got a special guest from Barker and Associates with us here today, Makarina Dalton. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Ata Māori e koutou, ko Makarina Dalton tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei no Ngāpuhi. He kaimahi au I roto, excuse me, I te Pākihi Barker and Associates. I'm a planner working at Barker and Associates, supporting the Kaipara District Plan with the Māori purpose and papakainga provisions. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Makarina. Thank you for that. We do have Megan Walters with us, but she is not going to come on camera this morning. So we'll move on to what we're covering today in this webinar. So just to basically, this is to introduce the Kaipara District Plan Review and the Exposure Draft District Plan, which has just been released. And today, through this webinar, we're going to give a more detailed but relatively brief overview of the Tangata Whenua, Mana Whenua chapter, which is a new chapter in the district plan. Makarina is going to talk through the Māori purpose zone, and we're going to talk about the sites and areas of significance to Māori. And then we're just going to highlight the opportunities for feedback on the exposure draft as well. So I'm now going to hand over to Ty, who's just going to talk about some of the definitions, just to make sure everybody's on board with some of the terminology that we use throughout the webinar.
Kia ora anō. So some of the definitions that we're required to use under the RMA are iwi authority, mana whenua, tangata whenua, and Māori cultural activities. These definitions are provided by the legislation, and iwi authority means the authority which represents an iwi and which is recognised by that iwi as having the authority to do so. Mana whenua means customary authority exercised by an iwi or hapu in an identified area. Tangata Whenua is in reference to, in relation to a particular area, means the iwi or hapu that holds mana whenua over that area. And Māori culture activities means activities undertaken or associated with whānau, hapu or iwi that are in accordance with tikanga, including ceremonial, ritual or recreational activities that recognise and provide for the relationship of tangata whenua and their cultural traditions with their ancestral lands, water sites, wahitapu and other taonga.
Thanks, Ty. And now I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of the district plan review. So you're probably wondering what a district plan is, and the Kaipara district plan is the rule book which is applied to help councils manage development, activities, and the environment within the district. So it is a really key document. The current operative district plan is a little bit old now, so it goes back to 2013. And because it's old, it's no longer fit for purpose, and it was due to be reviewed, which happens every 10 years under the Resource Management Act anyway. There are some higher order documents which the operative district plan does not give legal effect to, and this includes documents such as national policy statements, regional policy statements. So we need to bring this district plan up to date. The other thing that it doesn't do is it does not take into account iwi and hapu environmental management plans and how iwi and hapu would like to be engaged on various resource management matters. So this opportunity through the exposure draft is a really good chance for iwi, hapu, marae to jump on board and tell us what we need to be thinking about in that space. And just another note that at the bottom there, that the resource management reforms are coming up as well, which means that this district plan review will be the last one for Kaipara before we move into the new space, which has been signalled through those reforms. So if anyone's got any questions as we move through the webinar today, please feel free to put those in our chat box, but also we encourage anybody to provide feedback and get in touch with us as we prepare for the proposed district plan, which will be released next year. So just a bit of background on the exposure draft. We have developed some spatial plans for Kaipara, which you may have been involved in, and those spatial plans are now being implemented in this exposure draft. We have been in conversations already with Te Roroa and Te Rioho, and making sure that we are giving those spatial plans some life in this new district plan. This year and last year, since about September, the district planning team have been taking draft provisions, so objectives, policies and rules to elected members, and this is the fruits of our labour, and we're bringing that to you in the new exposure draft, which was released for the public in July this year. Now, Ty, do you want to just talk a little bit about where people can find our information?
So the exposure draft district plan has been released for public consultation, and you will find that on our Kaipara district plan review website. On that website, you'll find an overview of the Kaipara district plan review. You'll find the exposure draft district plan and the 22 fact sheets that summarise the main topics, and you'll also find where to have your say and how you can provide feedback. And you'll also see other opportunities to engage with us in the district plan team. And everything that you need on the Kaipara district plan review is found here in our district plan review website.
Awesome. Kia ora, Ty. Do you want to now take everybody through the Tangata Whenua Mana Whenua chapter?
Yeah, for sure. So the Tangata Whenua Mana Whenua chapter is an overarching chapter in our draft district plan, which is relevant to all chapters and zones within the plan. So the new draft chapter reflects the National Planning Standards Directive to have a standalone chapter, which includes an overview of Kaipara districts, Tangata Whenua and Mana Whenua. So at the moment, that's incorporative of Te Rioho and Te Roroa. However, we have deliberately drafted it to include other iwi authorities, and we expect feedback from other iwi authorities to be included in that chapter going forward. The plan directs users to the respective iwi hapu environmental management plans. So it's an enabling use of other environmental plans which must be taken into account under this draft district plan. and it aligns with Strategic Direction Chapter, which includes overarching objectives for the plan. So we encourage you to jump onto the Exposure Draft District plan and have a look at the new Tangata Whenua and Mana Whenua chapter and provide feedback and give your thoughts on the chapter that's currently in there now.
Kia ora Tai, and I think just on the strategic direction chapter as well, there's about 4 or 5 objectives that are quite broad, but they are aimed at covering kind of the key issues that we're trying to capture in this exposure draft. So that's another place if you want to check that out, just have a look over those. But certainly keen for any feedback from anyone interested in this chapter and the way that we've drafted that. So I'm now going to hand over to Makarina, who's going to take us through the Māori purpose zone. So are you there, Makarina?
Okay, so just a bit of background and context for how the Māori purpose zone has come about. So there's approximately just under 28% of the population within Kaipara either are of Māori descent or identify as Māori. Approximately 3% of the district is identified as Whenua Māori, which are those sort of purpley colour and concentrated in the north, south and quite a large portion just northeast of Dargaville Township. The average size of blocks is 42.5 hectares with a median size of 4.5 hectares. You might just have to click that 3 times, Catherine.
Ah, yes. This is the exciting part.
Oh, yes. This is where showing, I guess, the general spread of where the Whenua Māori is and where the Māori purpose zone is. Thank you. So just some of highlighting some of the barriers to development on Whenua Māori, and I think this emphasises the importance of ensuring district plan rules enable Whenua Māori development on Whenua Māori. So we know that there's complex ownership and succession challenges for Whenua Māori. There's a lack of management structures over whenua, so there's not many Māori trusts, ahu whenua trusts or corporations that make the administration of the whenua easier. So without those structures, it's harder to communicate with all your whānau to get everybody on board to undertake a development. So there's additional legislative layers or processes that you need to go through to occupy whenua if there's multiple owners. So you've got occupation orders or license to occupy, which you have to take through the Māori Land Court, and that can be a long or time-consuming process. There's also financial costs and a lack of funding pathways really for the development of Whenua Māori. With the traditional pathways not available, there have been new initiatives by the government in recent years to have mortgages on whenua through Kiwi Bank, but again, they're not as simple as just going to a traditional bank. Thank you, Catherine. So what is in the Māori purpose zone? What are the key outcomes that we're trying to achieve through the draft Māori purpose zone? So we're trying to recognise the relationship that Māori have to their ancestral lands. So by allowing maximum flexibility to occupy, develop and use Māori ancestral land, and allowing tangata whenua to exercise their kaitiaki over that whenua. So we want to incorporate the use of mātauranga Māori and tikanga Māori while ensuring that the health, safety and well-being of people and communities is maintained. The second one there is about the occupation, development and use within a thing called overlays. So overlays are those list of 5 overlays there. So you've got the natural character and coastal environment, outstanding natural landscapes, features, significant natural areas, sites of cultural significance to Māori and scheduled historic heritage. And so what this objective is trying to do is allow a pathway for the development of land where those overlays affect the whenua. the broad policy direction that we're trying to provide for in the Māori Purpose Zone is to enable a range of activities that are compatible with the role, function and character. So this comes down to what would you expect in the Māori Purpose Zone, what types of activities. So we want to provide for compatible industrial and commercial activities. So not huge, loud or smelly activities, but or noisy activities, but maybe businesses that can fit in with, say, papakainga or marae type activities, more sensitive activities. So we want to provide for the occupation, use and development within overlays. We want to recognise and provide for the use of mātauranga, Māori, tikanga Māori and kaitiakitanga. Require the location and scale of development to be determined by the physical characteristics of the land and the servicing capacity and tikanga Māori. So what that means is allowing for development, not just having rules that say you're only allowed to do, build one house on the whenua. Maybe you're allowed to build up to 10 houses, so long as the servicing capacity or the whenua can actually cater for that level of activity. And then ensuring that adverse effects are managed appropriately. So what types of activities are provided for in the Māori Purpose Zone? So we've got the green activities, which are things you can do without resource consent, so long as you comply with the permitted standards. So you've got Māori purpose activities, papakainga housing, marae, urupa, educational facilities, visitor accommodation, agricultural, pastoral and horticultural activities, so traditional farming, commercial and industrial activities, and Māori cultural activities. So things that might need a resource consent could be any one of those activities listed in the green box where you can't, your building is too close to your boundary, or maybe the building is too high, you've got too much impermeable surface or coverage over the site. That's when you tip into needing a resource consent as a restricted discretionary. And then for large-scale commercial and heavy industrial activities, those are discretionary and non-complying activities.
Kia ora there, Makarena. So that concludes the Māori Purpose Zone. And if anybody's got any questions on that, please feel free to chuck them in the YouTube chat box there. Now, Tai, would you like to step us through the historical and cultural values chapters there? And I can jump in if you need me to.
Okie dokie. So historical and cultural values. Under the new Exposure Draft District Plan, we have 3 chapters that cover historical and cultural values in the district plan. So that's the historical heritage chapter, the sites and areas of significance to Māori chapter, and the notable trees chapter. The historical heritage has identified new buildings, sites, and items have been, and the main key message here is that there's an opportunity for new historical heritage buildings to be added here to the schedule, or to be submitted for assessment to be added to the schedule. The sites and areas of significance to Māori chapter currently in the draft district plan is scheduled with statutory sites from settlement claim legislation, and we are awaiting additional sites from Mana Whenua and Tangata Whenua to be lodged and assessed and scheduled. And we welcome more sites from iwi authorities, marae, whānau, hapu, and Tangata Whenua in the rohe to submit significance sites and areas of significance to Māori. And I'm just going to flesh it out a little bit, because sites and areas of significance to Māori isn't language that we exactly use every day. So it basically is just referring to wahitapu, taonga areas, trails, heritage trails, our mahinga kai trails, and our other cultural areas. So keeping that in front of mind helps make sense of what a site and area of significance to Māori might be referring to in the draft district plan. Moving on to notable trees. Currently there's there's only few trees in the operative district plan, and we're seeking to have more trees added to that schedule. And new trees can be identified for assessment and submitted to council. So if you really, really like the oak tree down at the bottom of the road there, and you think that it's significant because it was planted in 1842 or something along those lines, those are the kind of trees that you can submit for scheduling or assessment for scheduling on the notable tree schedule. And there are also, just to add to that, there are also trees that are culturally significant, and it might be that those trees are listed as a site and area of significance to Māori, like a tree where whenua was buried, or where significant events happened. Those might be sites and areas of significance rather than a notable tree. So we are looking for new submissions on notable trees for scheduling in the draft district plan. So there's a criteria on what against which these sites and areas of significance must be assessed. So the site or area must be representative, and the important thing to note here is of either. So it doesn't need to include every single criteria. It has to have either one of these, any one of these criteria it can hit. So historical heritage or physical archaeological, or a site where Māori have maintained a relationship through one or more of the following criteria, which is spiritual significance, archaeological, historical significance, cultural significance, or holding significant traditional values, just like the Mahinga Kai trails that I was talking about earlier. And the location of the sites and areas are nominated must be accompanied with the whai kōrero or the pūrākau based on the tikanga and tradition, and should also speak of the cultural values that Māori associate with the site or area. So basically a kōrero that just speaks about why that place is significant, so that there is a storytelling context to why this place needs to be managed carefully. KDC acknowledges its inability to correctly assess these cultural nominations. We're not the technical experts on that, and we've enlisted the cultural expertise of our mana whenua partners, Te Reo and Te Roroa, to assist us there. Obviously, areas outside of Te Reo and Te Roroa will require other cultural expertise, which will come through guidance from Te Reo and Te Roroa. So what are we proposing in the exposure draft district plan? So the draft provisions currently reflect engagement requirements and consultation expectations between the resource user and Tangata Whenua mana whenua, so that the user is really clear what's expected of them in terms of engagement with Tangata Whenua and mana whenua. The chapter provides for agreements between correct Tangata Whenua mana whenua and the resource user for acceptable use and boundary determination for scheduled sites and areas of significance to Māori. And the chapter promotes and encourages the use of kaitiaki and mātauranga for scheduled sites and areas of significance to Māori. The chapter includes the IHEM provisions, so that's the iwi and hapu environmental management plans from Te Roroa and Te Reo. And the higher restrictions, it also includes higher restrictions on activities including earthworks and subdivision, and it does not allow for new quarrying and mining activities within a scheduled site and area of significance to Māori. Importantly, the sites and areas of significance chapter is supported by the Tangata Whenua mana whenua chapter and strategic direction objectives, which are those overarching chapters that apply to all of the plan.
Kia ora tai. And that pretty much wraps up everything we were going to talk about with the sites and areas of significance to Māori, as well as those other historical matters. So do make sure you give us some feedback on that. So I'm just going to quickly gloss over a couple more topics that might be of interest to Tangata Whenua mana whenua. One is the hazards and risks chapter, which does affect quite a big portion of the district, particularly as some marae are located within flood risk areas. So it is important to check that out if you're in that situation. But the key things to note here is that council have updated the provisions. So these are draft provisions, and we do want the public's feedback on those. We've also updated the mapping to reflect the recent work that the Northern Regional Council have done in that space, noting that there is some ongoing flood modelling work, which affects the Raupo drainage catchment area, and those maps are yet to be updated. As you can see there in the inset picture, there's a lot of blue in there, and that could change as a result of the additional hydrological modelling that's happening at the moment. So as I say, check out those provisions. We're also looking ahead to climate change. There's not a lot in the exposure draft at the moment around climate change because there's quite a bit happening in that space, and we do want feedback on that. At the moment, we have included some strategic direction around how climate change should be looked at and viewed in terms of the district plan, but you'll probably see some more stuff coming in that space when we prepare the proposed district plan next year. And then just quickly on the environment values, because we did a presentation, a webinar last night. If you're interested in that, Paul covered off all of the key changes to the chapters there. But I think the key things to note is really that our coastal environment map has been updated, and it does shrink, if you like, the areas that were previously deemed coastal environment in the operative district plan from about 20% down to 8.6%. So this is a change, but noting that there are some areas that between those overlays. What is new in the exposure draft is the natural character areas as well. So you might want to have a look at where they are. And outstanding natural features is something new, but the landscapes are already in the operative district plan with the addition of Sentinel Hill at Mangawhai there. So check out those. And as I said, these are updated to reflect the regional policy statement provisions and maps. Just on some general district-wide matters, so Mana Whenua and Tangata Whenua will be quite interested in earthwork provisions, and as Tai pointed out before, there are some specific rules for quarrying and mining activities within sites and areas of significance to Māori, but there are a whole bunch of earthwork rules, which I've got a slide on coming up, and we'd certainly value any input, especially on the in the multi-purpose zone, to make sure that we're providing enough flexibility to do the things that Māori would like to do on the whenua. The light chapter is not a big change from the operative district plan, and this obviously has implications on mostly industrial and commercial type activities where there's lighting effects on more sensitive environments like residential. The noise chapter is also largely based on the operative district plan, with some additional provisions in there for things like helicopter landing pads and wind turbines, which there was not much on in the operative district plan. So there are some changes in there, but again, it's not a significant shift from the operative district plan provisions. The signs chapter, we're aiming to get a bit more consistency there with our signs bylaw, but by and large, we've adopted what was in the operative district plan. So if you've got any signage issues, that's where you want to check out what we're putting into the exposure draft. Two new activities or two new chapters that might be of interest as well is temporary activities. So this is new in the exposure draft and is really designed around controlling and managing activities such as markets, sports events. It could be temporary motorsport events, that type of thing. So check that out. Genetically modified organisms is a new chapter to the Kaipara district plan. There shouldn't be any surprises in there because we're trying to get consistency here with our neighbouring councils, Far North, Whangarei and Auckland Council in this space. We're the only northern council currently that don't have provisions in the district plan for genetically modified organisms. So if you've got anything you want to say on that, then definitely let us know. And just back to earthworks. Thanks, Megan. Excuse me. We've got a couple of thresholds that might be worth checking out, especially for the multi-purpose zone. So just have a look in there, and as I said before, there's a few rules around sensitive environments. So the coastal high natural character areas, outstanding natural character areas, whether you're in an outstanding natural feature or an outstanding landscape or a flood hazard area. We've also got provisions for farm quarries, so some of the whenua might have a farm quarry on it. So you just want to maybe check out what's proposed there. And I guess the key point about the earthwork rules is that we are trying to get some regional consistency with the Northern Regional Plan, so to make sure that that they align there. So some of the thresholds have been adopted to ensure consistency. So that concludes the presentation on the district-wide matters there. I've just had a question handed to me here about if a marae is scheduled as a site or area of significance to Māori, but the whānau want to develop a nursery for commercial purposes, which includes which rules would apply, and the rules under the SASM or the Māori Purpose Zone rules. So Makarena and Tai, if you're both there, I feel like this might be a question for Makarena just in terms of Māori Purpose Zone rules. You might be able to provide an answer, and Tai in respect to the sites and areas of significance to Māori for that commercial activity. So if they're developing a nursery, what would be the requirements there? So.
Kia ora mō tērā pātai. Good question. So what would happen when you have, so if your whenua, if the marae whenua is, say, a Māori reserve, then it would get picked up as being a Māori purpose zone. So you would have the Māori purpose zone that sits here and has rules around how development for marae activities can occur, and associated so other small-scale activities like a nursery or something like that could be either a horticultural activity or it could be a commercial, depending on how it operated. So you'd have rules that would enable or restrict it in the Māori purpose zone, and then on top you would have the site of cultural significance rules, which would add another layer of restriction. But I'll let Taiawhio speak to that.
So the second part of that question there, Catherine, was that can I develop a nursery if it's a site of significance to Māori?
Yeah, and my thinking, Tai, just to help you along with that too, is that if you were a site of significance to Māori, you'll still have your underlying zone provision. So if you're not within Makarena's Māori purpose zone, but you're still within, for instance, a rural zone, the rural zone rules will apply. But you need to just bear in mind that you may have the sites of significance to Māori rules apply to if you're doing any particular earthworks or structures and things that might be affected by the sites of significance to Māori provisions there as well. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Tai?
No, that covers it, I think.
Cool. I've got one more question here that's just come through. So what if my family land is zone Māori purpose, but has a high outstanding natural character overlay? Can I develop the land, or would it be would more restrictive overlays take precedent? So I think this is a good one for you, Makarena, to lead on from what you were saying earlier. So if you could just provide a bit of a answer to that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And I think similar to the sites of cultural significance overlay, so yes, you have your underlying zone rules that apply to the whenua. And depending on what overlay it is, there will still be those additional layers of restriction. What we've tried to do, starting with the Tangata Whenua chapter, right at the beginning of the plan, filter down to all of the overlays to try and provide a consenting pathway for development within the overlays, so on whenua Māori or on within the Māori purpose zone. So you may still need a resource consent to do development, but there are pathways for specific types of development that relate to, say, papakainga housing or Māori cultural activities. So there are pathways for development on whenua Māori that are different to other land, more general land.
And if I can just chip in there to say as well that that's where it's really important, the earthwork rules that I was just talking through, there are some quite restrictive proposed thresholds. So, you know, I think it's like 100 to 150 cubic meters of earthworks can be undertaken in some of those overlays, and like the outstanding natural character areas, you might just want to check those out, and those are the areas that we would like feedback on, because if landowners are going to be quite heavily constrained, we'd like to know what that kind of looks like, and if there's some good examples around Kaipara that are going to need consent every single time, then it would be good to know what they would look like. And as Makarena pointed out, it could be that we're just looking at a few effects in terms of resource consents versus large scale effects. So really good questions that those two people have asked. So thank you for that. And I don't have any additional questions at this. Oh, there's one coming just down the hallway. Hold on. Thank you very much, Megan. Okay, what approach would the district plan take if a farm quarry is near a site and site and area of significance to Māori is near it? Will it still be a permitted activity? That's a really good question, and Ty might want to chip in on this one as well. But if there's a farm quarry, obviously there's permitted volumes of earthworks that can be undertaken. The sites of significance to Māori actually do take precedence here, and certainly that's what we're trying to achieve with our mapping. So my response would be that if we can demonstrate that it falls within a site of, or area of significance to Māori, then it probably won't be a permitted activity to undertake those earthworks. If it's outside of that area, though, it could be argued that it is a permitted activity. So that's where I think it's really important with when we're identifying those sites and areas of significance to Māori, that we are covering a significant area, but obviously not that we would probably find it hard to cover the whole of Kaipara, bearing in mind there's some undiscovered sites as well. But certainly we'd be wanting to make sure that we're protecting the values there. Did you have anything to add to that? I see, Michael, you've popped on the screen there.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Look, it's a good question. And at this stage, how our policy and rule regime has been drafted is that the rules apply within an identified site or area of significance. So the rules don't apply outside of the mapped SASM. But look, it's a really good question, and would appreciate feedback on this one, because as with most planning, there can be a tension with what activities to allow and what activities to not allow. So, yep, it's a good question, but at this stage, our rules say no, they actually apply within the identified site and area and not outside. Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. See any more questions running down the hallway? So I think that possibly concludes where we're at this morning. So I'm just going to jump ahead. And certainly if there are any other questions that arise from today's webinar, please do get in touch with us. So we've got the District Plan Review at Kaipara email address there. And certainly, as Ty pointed out earlier, go through our District Plan Review website page. There's plenty of opportunity to chat to planners one-on-one, and certainly we want to get some feedback from you. So please do feel free to get your feedback to us. Now I'm just going to close this out with a karakia video.
E karakia whakamutunga, kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea naro, ki roto ki tēnā o tātou, kia māhea te hua māki ki toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, ki hei mauri ora.